Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for this invitation, the occasion of sharing some thoughts about doing research in a particular field now that I am going to present, the interrelation between mountain, rural, and urban territories. But as the agreement with Maxime, the idea was more to try to discuss the methodology. I'm going to discuss something about the results, of course, the background, but this is intended as a presentation in order to raise questions and to go more in depth about how it's possible to build a process like this of research involving different actors. So, I am Andrea Membretti. I am a researcher and sociologist. I teach sociology of the territory, but Maxime already probably has presented me. So the issue, the topic of this presentation is contemporary European experiences of applied social research, from concept to implementation. I would like to start with this very well-known statement by the sociologist Kurt Lewin in 1946, when he stated that the best way to understand things is to modify them. I like very much this statement because I am always, or often, not always, but often committed to doing action research. So to create coalition of interest in order to investigate a social reality, a social territorial economic reality, and while investigating this reality, producing knowledge that is capable to transform the reality we are observing. So this is the approach of action research, and I really wanted to share with you this first statement by Kurt Lewin. So, Maxime, do I have 45 minutes or something? Sorry, I don't remember.
Sorry, could you please repeat?
I don't remember how much time do I have for the presentation, Maxime.
For the presentation, as you wish. We have actually 1 hour and a half for the...
okay, so maybe 45 minutes, more or less. Is it okay?
Okay. Okay.
But you can interrupt me, or of course the colleagues, the students can interrupt me when they like. So this is the structure of the presentation. I assume you are always seeing my screen. So I'm going to present a single research project that is MICLIMI, is about what we call vertical migration as climate change adaptation in the Alps. So we will be focusing on a specific portion of Western Europe, a specific portion of Italy that is shared with other 6 countries from France to Slovenia. So this is the region, the macro region. But the intention is to discuss a process of coalition building, research and investigation that could be applied in other contexts. So a case study of climate-driven migration research project. I'm going to discuss with you in this presentation the history and scope of this project, the formation of the coalition of support that is very important. So how were we capable of gaining resources, legitimation in order to proceed in our project? Then, of course, research design and methodology, the research outcomes, and again, to what extent these outcomes are and will be useful for the participants to the research. Remember what I was telling you a few minutes ago. So the action research approach in general is an approach aiming at modifying the reality. So it's important that the outcomes of the research have some utility, some are fruitful to some extent for the people involved, for the stakeholders, local actors, national actors, and whatever. And finally, further developments. So future steps, other research questions, and in particular, how to engage even more the coalition of interest built around this process. So, history and scope of the project. I needed to say something as a background of this research, and this is the part of the presentation from concepts and general overview, the facts, the background, literature review, of course, already existing data, and what are we going to do. So, first of all, let me say a few words about the relationship between migration and climate change. This is the basis of our project. As we know, for example, from the reports of the International Panel on Climate Change, the relationship between migration, environment, and climate change is multi-causal. So we cannot say that climate change is directly transforming the society, is directly impacting it's alone on these dynamics, but always together with other drivers of change, social, political, economical, geopolitical ones. So this is the first point. Secondly, when we talk about the relationship between climate change and migration, there is a strict dominance of discourse and analysis on the global south. If you consider literature, most of the literature, quite all literature, has been focusing on movement of people in particular in Africa, in Latin America, in any case in the so-called global south due to climate change. But there is very, very less evidence on migration in Europe, in particular in Western Europe, in relationship to climate change. And the third point is that at an international level, political level, social level, public opinion, but also literature, the attention has been focused more on international migration flows and not on internal migration flows. I mean, internal migration is the migration within a state, within a region, within a valley. We do know that there is a lot of migration. Consider that the data provided by IOM, the International Migration Organization from the United Nations, say that more or less 80% of migration in the world is internal one. People are moving from one region to another, from one city to another. 20% more or less is international or intercontinental migration. But our attention is really driven to focus on international migration, also for political issues and other international questions. Again, when we talk about concepts and background, moving to a more specific region, let's consider briefly the situation in the Alps. The Alps are one of the most known mountainous range in the world, and for decades have been considered mainly as places of out-migration, depopulation, aging, abandonment of land, in particular in Italy, but also in France, in Austria, in Slovenia. But despite these facts, and despite that already now in these years, till 2024, we do have these outflows of people from the Alps. On the other side, we have been witnessing in the last 20 years, 25 years, a reversal trend. There are people moving to the Alps. Most of this is internal migration from big towns, metropolitan areas, from the lowlands to the upper, to the islands, for a mix of factors. Now in this presentation, I'm going to consider the climatic factors, but there are also other factors. Green values, the search for different lifestyles, amenity migration, the need for a safer place with respect to the metropolitan areas in times of pandemics and whatever. So assume that there is this reversal trend. Of course, there are several data confirming this trend. In particular, you may have a look to the data produced by the Alpine Convention in the past 10 years. There is this reversal trend of people. At the same time, we must consider, as we talk about climate change, we talk about environmental transformation, that mountains, in particular the Alps, are among the most environmentally fragile ecosystems in Europe, or even in the world to some respect, because they are very, very anthropized. They are full of activities, but at the same time there is abandonment of the land. They are one of the most relevant hotspots in Europe, because when we think about the change of temperature, we think usually about the lowlands, and this is one of the issue we have been considering in our MiClimi research project. But at the same time, of course, temperatures are changing even in the mountains with some relevant effects. So we are dealing with the impacts of climate change and new migration processes in an environmentally fragile ecosystem as the Alps. Last but not least, to introduce this background of the research, let's consider something that we are not so familiar with in general, I think. As the International Organization for Migration, IOM, I was quoting before, states, migration is a form of adaptation. And this is hard to accept to some extent. Consider also the political implication that do have this statement. But definitely, if we consider what happens in the rest of the world with other forms of life, so I mean plants, animals, when the environment is changing, is not favorable anymore for life of this organism, they move elsewhere. So migration definitely in biology, in environmental studies, is a form of adaptation to changing local conditions. So first of all, we were moving from this statement, considering that climate change is changing the condition of life, for example, in big metropolitan areas, and people need to adapt. Adaptation, of course, can be putting some system of refrigeration in your flat, could be trying to reduce your use of fossil resources. There are different ways of adapting or even preventing the effect of climate change. But human mobility, the mobility in general, is from the beginning of history the most traditional way of adapting. So it's important at the same time, to close on this introduction, consider that we do have an imaginary about migration that is very, very strongly framed into within a media political labeling, public discourse, and we tend to consider migration often, in particular in the debate in Western countries in these years, as something that is only related to international flows of people, again, from the global south, people without resources that are trying to reach northern countries, that are trying to reach this wealthy Europe. This is not the case, because there are these flows, but at the same time, we should consider that mobility, human mobility, is a transversal experience. Every one of us, more or less, do have in his or her life, and this experience is based on the resources we do have: cultural capital, social capital, relationships, money, our passport. And there are other factors, of course, mobility, the so-called mobility regimes that are framing our opportunities or constraints in terms of mobility. And so we, with the project, with this analyzing this background and conceptualizing a bit more, we wanted to explore a specific kind of migration that is the one including verticality. Again, we are not so used to consider migration as a three-dimensional process. More or less, we consider that there is the movement from one point to another point, like it was a plane space, let's say. In fact, on the contrary, when we consider mountain territories like the Alps, you have ascendant or descendant migration. You have the verticality gaining a role. And so we must recognize that there is a role in migration for verticality. Let me show you a couple of maps and close this first section of the presentation. If you have any question or you would like to interrupt me, please feel free. This map is about the Alps. I assume that more or less you know something about the Alps, but eventually not at all. So it's not compulsory to have information and preparation about this territory. Anyway, it's quite well known worldwide. This is a map from the colleagues of the University of Innsbruck in Austria, showing amenity migration in the Alps, more or less 8 years ago. When you see the darkest red, you have more people coming for amenity reasons. You know maybe something about amenity migration. Now, I do not have time to enter into details, but it means people looking for better places where to live, usually people that have some economic resources, and they want, for example, to settle down in a cottage in the Alps because there is there a better quality of life with respect to a big metropolitan area or other places. So you see that in darkest red, you have more presence of amenity migrants. And I wanted just to show this map to say two things. One is that the situation is quite scattered. As I will show in another couple of maps, you have a different situation. So there are territories attractive and other territories that do not attract anyone or that are losing population. The blue ones are losing, are not attractive, for example, for amenity migrants. And the other things is that on the on the western side of the Alps, where there is all that red, you have one part of the Alps that was mostly depopulated in the 60s and the 70s of the past century. And there was a place, there were abandoned buildings, there was the opportunity to settle for these amenity migrants. Another map is about foreign residents in the Alps. Here, the more you see the darkest red, the more you have foreign residents. Of course, you may immediately see that Switzerland do have a lot of foreign residents. Consider that now in many regions, you have in many cantons of Switzerland, you have 40% of international residents, that's not without the Swiss citizenship. But in all the Alpine arc, you have foreign residents. So this means that the Alps are attractive for different categories of people. And then last map, this is about the population change in demographic terms. So people with official residence in Alpine municipality between 2012 and 2018. So just before the COVID pandemics. Here, more the green is dark, more you have an increase in population. And you see again that is very scattered. There are regions in the Alps attractive for people, sometimes because they are close to metropolitan areas. On the north, you see, for example, Munich is there and Bavaria. So there are, of course, people living in the Alps because they are close to Munich, but also very depopulated regions like in Eastern Alps and Western Alps are attractive for different categories of people. So this is more or less the state of art, the background. We were moving with this research project. So the background was that there is already a movement of people towards the Alps, and we wanted to concentrate on climatic factors. We do know that there are other factors, social capital, economic resources, lifestyle, if you like or not, skiing and living in ski resorts. There are different reasons, but we wanted to investigate in this project the thematic and environmental ones. So, as I was saying, it was very important to create a coalition of actors, of stakeholders, in order to support this project, because we had the idea of investigating, but this issue. But for example, we needed to get the money for conducting this research project, and even more important, to gain legitimization. So we needed to be legitimized when discussing and presenting a topic that was not in the core, in the agenda of some political or institutional actors. And so we were proceeding in the formation of this coalition of support. First of all, let me say that it's very important that the project was promoted by an association of the civil society. It was not a project born within the academia, even if in a strong relationship with the academia, but within a group of people that is the Association of the European Climate Pact Ambassadors. This is an association operating in Italy, but the European Climate Pact Ambassadors are in all the Western countries. It's something created by the EU Commission in order to engage people in promoting the European Climate Pact, reducing the impact on the environment of our activities, and so far and so on. But it's important that the research project was initiated as the idea from an association of the civil society, so strongly engaged with the idea of producing data still not available in order to transform the reality in better, hopefully. Another important issue was, as always, I must say, personal relationships, direct interactions. There were personal links established with several researchers in different universities. Me, personally, as I was the coordinator of this research project, mainly conducted between 2022 and 2023, and it was closed at the end of last year, I was contacted by the association of the ambassadors. And they told me, are you interested in this? And we started a kind of bargaining. And then I was in charge of coordinating the process and the project. And we were involving a wide network of researchers from different universities, as you see, and also different institutions, not only universities. Because the idea was to produce data useful to change something in managing this particular form of adaptation that is migration towards the mountains. So we did make an effort in order to involve, for example, institutional actors like local actors. So it was with us the metropolitan city of Turin, that is a very important regional authority in northwestern Italy, the most relevant in terms of mountain territory within this region. And it was in the board with us. So we were gaining support from different researchers, different institutions, among the others, the the International Organization of Migration, IOM, that was involved. And we were building a scientific committee with all these people, and we were finally gaining support. And this is interesting that the support was not coming from a typical research funds, for example, from the European Commission or from elsewhere. But we were obtaining the money from a bank foundation. Because this bank foundation operating in northern Italy was and still is interested in having something to say in the management of these migration flows for different reasons. Just a couple. By one side, there is a matter of social integration, a matter of coordination with respect to these migration flows of people. On the other hand, there is, for example, the rising in the prices of real estate. Because if you have people moving to some mountain reserve, mountain locality, probably the prices of the real estate in that locality will rise. So there are different interests. And we were capable to gain the support of this Fondazione Cariplo, this very relevant, the most relevant bank foundation in Italy. Finally, when we were securing the funds, we were enlarging the coalition, in particular involving two very relevant actors. One is an institutional one, ISTAT, the National Institute of Statistics, the Italian Institute of Statistics, and the other is an association, Riabitare l'Italia, a relevant association, national one, operating in the field of trying to bring back people to inner rural, mountainous, or remote regions, and not only accepting the concentration in mega agglomeration like the metropolitan areas. So we were involving also these other stakeholders. And with this approach, we were capable to create a really strong coalition of interest of people, actors, stakeholders interested in the project for different reasons, academic and scientific ones, political ones, even economic ones, and the civil society. So I can move forward on the research design and methodology. But again, if you have any question, please interrupt. So the research, now I'm going a bit more fast because I do not want to spend too much time on the results, but it is important to say that the research MICLIMI had three main aims. The first one, mapping climate change and environmental socioeconomic fragility, the exposure to this climate change in socioeconomic terms, within a specific region that we call the Padana Metromontane region, that is the Alps and the Padana Plain, so the plain, the Italian biggest plain on the foothill of the mountains. First of all, mapping this situation in terms of climate change impact, and at the same time building, constructing, defining a migration propensity index from big towns to the mountains on the basis of these indicators that we were collecting in terms of fragility with respect to climate change. Second aim was quantifying internal migration flows in terms of change of official residence of the people from metropolitan areas to mountain municipalities. And here we were restricting our field research on two very important Italian regions, Lombardy, the region of Milan, and Piedmont, the region of Turin. Finally, we had the aim to investigate the propensity to internal migration from metropolitan areas toward the Alps, toward the mountains. So how people consider the opportunity to move. And first of all, who already was moving, and climate change conditions. Just to show you a map, this is the metropolitan Padana region. You see the most relevant and quite well-known towns from Turin, Genoa, Milan, and Venice. And then there is the map of Italy on the right in my screen, so you can see where is more or less this portion of the Italian space. But this is not so relevant. It's just important to see that there is a big plain with all these metropolitan areas, industrial areas, infrastructures, but you have all this Alpine arc that is all around to some extent, on the north, on the east, on the west, and there is this strong interaction in economic terms, in terms of mobility, in terms of people coming and going, circular migration. So this is the territorial field of our research. Methodology, I think that this could be of some interest for you, in particular for the ones among you who are in their training, who are doing a PhD. I do not know your career stage, but methodology, of course, is fundamental. So it's not so common adopting a transdisciplinary approach in academia in general. We are used to research projects only or mainly mobilizing the knowledge coming from social sciences or from meteorology or from geography or from territorial economics. In this case, we wanted to collect different expertise, and so from sociology, demography, statistics, geography, but even hard sciences like climatology, meteorology, we created this scientific committee and this group of researchers from different disciplines. And I think that this was fundamental because we were capable to collect data in different fields and to offer a wider and quite complex vision of the processes occurring, not only considering from one point of view. And the methodology was well articulated, I think, with different tools and instruments. Among the others, there was the construction of ad hoc peculiar survey tools, in particular a questionnaire. We were distributing online to a sample of 2,000 people, but also the outlines for in-depth qualitative interviews. Part of the methodology was the collection and analysis of primary socio-demographic data. So we were in particular considering quantitative data related to the already existing movements of people, but also quantitative data, for example, about heat waves or extreme rainfalls, because the aim was, as I was saying, to put together, to create an interaction of different factors in our explication. So quantitative data have been demographic ones, for example, but also data related to extreme events related to heat waves in metropolitan areas. And then there was the analysis of this secondary. So we were collecting, and our methodology was adopting an approach related also to secondary data, primary data, secondary data, and the construction of spatial maps. So representing in maps, as the maps I was showing you before about the Alpine arc, these processes. Because I am really convinced that the visual representation is fundamental. So we do need to have maps in order to figure out this kind of processes. Last but not least, there was within the wider study an ethnographic case study on a specific mountain resort in Switzerland. So not in Italy, on the other side of the Alps from Italy, in Crans-Montana. So the idea was also to have a specific ethnographic case study with direct observation, qualitative and narrative interviews, collection of pictures, photographs, analysis of the context. So there was also this little case study within the wider research. This is just to show you the case study of Crans-Montana. And so let's come to research outcomes and their value for the project participants and supporters. As I already told you, there were three main areas of interest of our research. Mapping climate change impact was the first one. What we discovered, that the scenario for the Padana Plain in particular is dramatic, considering the period 2021 with the provisional data coming to 2040. There will be a rise on already an additional rise of temperature with heat waves, precipitation anomalies, and tropical nights. So the climate and the weather conditions are really changing in the Padana Plain. It's something that is going in the direction of a tropical situation in terms of humidity, in terms of temperature, above 40 degrees Celsius for 2-3 months during the summer. So all this is creating a condition not so favorable for people living there. At the same time, climate change in the next 20 years is going to have an impact also on socioeconomic activities and quality of lives. So it's something that is creating more fragility in metropolitan areas. Consider only the issue of energy. What does it mean if you have for 3 months 40, 42, 45 degrees in a big metropolitan area like Milan? It means that you have to use your systems of refrigeration, your air-conditioned systems for 3-4 months. You must live mainly within closed space, within the buildings. You cannot access external areas if not within your car or in public transportation with air conditioning. So consider the exaggerated cost of this. This is part of an exposure to socioeconomic fragility of metropolitan areas due to climate change. Cost will rise. Condition of life will worsen. And consider, for example, health. We already have thousands of people in Milan or Turin dying during the summer for heat waves. More than what we have for COVID-19 in big metropolitan areas. People are dying, in particular elderly people, people with some disease, but also new problems new health problems for the children, for example. So this means not only health problems, problems in terms of quality of life, but also economic fragility, because you will have to pay more. The state or the local system, local welfare will have to take care of these problems. So climate change is going to impact on the Padana Plain metropolitan areas in several ways. These composite indicators we were producing are all showing that the conditions are evolving in the direction of a predisposition, a tendency, a trend to auto-migration. Of course, this will depend on the resources people will have. Because if migration is a form of adaptation, you must have the economic, social, cultural resources. There must be the mobility regime in order that you can move. If not, you will remain in your, of course, very, very difficult environmental situation, but you will not be in the condition of move. So we were creating these composite indicators, not going in depth on this, but just to show you two maps. Lombardy on the top, on the left, and Piedmont down on the right. More in red, darkest red is indicating the potential out-migration of people from these territories. And maybe you do not see so well. Is not so. In my screen is a bit small. The picture, the map, but you can see that in particular some metropolitan areas are under stress, but not only. Also other areas of the Padana Plain, very full of other infrastructures, full of other villages, other suburbia will be affected by this problem. And in particular, we have been considering heat waves, tropical nights, and precipitation drought. So there is the first part of the research was showing that there is a clear propensity to migrate due to climate change. That does not mean that people will move, but that the general condition of the environment will push to move. Then it will depend, as I was saying, from a mobility regime, policies, governance, economic resources. Second part of the research was devoted to investigate the actual movement of people from metropolitan areas to mountain villages in terms of residents, canceling their official residence in the town and taking a new residence permit, let's say, in a mountain village. Although there are not till now big numbers of people, consider that among the people moving from Milan or from Turin outside, taking the residence in another place, from 7 to 10% have been moving to mountain villages in the period 2018-2022. So there is a trend, not so quantitative, enormous, but relevant. And it's important considering that in particular during the pandemic, 2020-2021, there was a peak in people taking their official residence in the mountains in order to escape not only climate change impact, but of course, the impact of the pandemics. The third area of the research was devoted to investigate the propensity to migrate, but this time not in terms of climate change indicators, I was showing briefly you before with the maps, but the intention of the people. So we were interested in knowing how much people living in metropolitan areas of the Padana Plain are concerned about climate change and to what extent they consider mountain villages as a solution to escape from the extreme consequences of climate change in the next future. And with this survey, with a statistical representative sample of 2,062 people living in the main metropolitan areas of northern Italy, we were capable to collect quite relevant data. Now I'm just resuming you 3-4 of the main information. First of all, people are very worried about the future impact and the already existing impact of climate change in their urban situation, in their metropolitan areas. In particular, young people are very, very worried. In particular, women. There is also a gender issue. There is a strong awareness that climate change is going to impact in the quality of life and on the family, on the elderly people, on kids in the town. At the same time, there is a medium-high appreciation for the mountains, in particular for the Alps. What does it mean? That there was a a kind of shift, a change in the public imaginary and representation of the mountains in Italy in the last 20, 25 years. Now mountains, for several reasons, also mainly cultural reason, literature, films, movies, became quite attractive as an imaginary for people. But now this imaginary, positively associated to the mountains, has been activated, let's say, in relationship to climate change. So there is a quite high appreciation of the mountains, especially among young people. And consider that 1/3 of the sample, more than 30% of the interviewees, were considering, last year when we conducted the research, considering moving to the mountains at least for long or medium-term periods, particularly during the long summer, because of climate change, but also because of other conditions, because they think that in the mountains they will find better health condition, they will have contact with nature. So you see that there is a mix of factors. Climate change is something that is exacerbating a situation already existing. So many people were already considering a change in their lifestyle, if possible, more in contact with nature, leaving the stress of metropolitan areas, eventually doing smart working, living with a multi-local approach. And now climate change is confirming that this trend could be the right one. And so these main results of the investigation, to what extent were and are interesting for the coalition we were creating. First of all, we have been producing new scientific knowledge about a phenomenon that is still not really investigated, in particular in the global north. So this creation of knowledge, innovative knowledge, is something that is helping a socio-economic ecosystem in adapting itself to the new condition and producing some forecasting, creating the condition for imagining a different future. So it's a help in terms of reframing the situation and considering how it could evolve in the light of this new data and information. Then we were producing data, maps, scenarios, helpful for designing and implementing innovative territorial governance at metropolitan level. So remember, we had in our board, for example, the metropolitan city of Turin. We have been producing data useful for the governance of this territory, because if you know something more about the trends, people moving to the mountains, the general trends in terms of climate change, you will be in the condition of create innovative policies, innovative governance at metropolitan level, so connecting the mountains and the plain. And then another couple of results were useful for the coalition. We were developing during this year, 2024, and again, they will continue in 2025 and 2026, some future labs in some valleys, in some localities involved in the project, where local communities in a project that is the follow-up of Miclimi have been involved in designing innovative ways of adapting to climate change, attracting new residents, or remaining in an innovative way in their territories. Last but not least, the project was producing a collective divulgative book that was published this year. And we have been conducting till now more than 30 public events and presentations in 5 months. And this is a tool for engaging people, involving people with scientific data around the issue of climate change and human mobility. I'm going to close. Thank you for your attention with further developments about the research and about our coalition engagement. About the research, we have some relevant questions among the others. But one question that is very relevant for us, dealing with a phenomenon that potentially will interest a huge quantity of people in our region, in our Padana plain, but also in other regions. The main issue for us is who can afford or will afford in the future to escape from climate change impacting so dramatically on metropolitan areas, moving to mountain resorts. So not everyone will have the opportunity to buy a second home, to rent a house in the mountain, to stay there for a period, to move there definitely. It depends on several conditions, but money first of all, and then the kind of job people do have, other conditions, family conditions. So this is one important question that deal with policies in order to create the conditions for overcoming potential inequalities in the distribution of the access to the mountains. Secondly, are the mountains really a safe refuge for the people in the future? Because climate change is impacting also in the mountains. You will not have 40 degrees in Crans-Montana, in Courmayeur, in St. Moritz, but you will have the effects of climate change in other terms. There will be droughts, for example, there will be extreme events, scarcity of resources. So even the mountains will be more fragile. So it's also a matter of discussing policies in order not to have an heavy impact on fragile ecosystems. Because if you are going to move, you are going to witness thousands and thousands of people moving from the lowlands to the mountains, this will have a strong and even dramatic impact on those ecosystems. So this is the second question. And finally, this is related, which policies are needed to govern, to manage these migration flows? And this is an issue that is more in general related with the global situation. So we do lack, to some extent, I am convinced that we do lack policies in order to manage international and internal migration flows. And this is evident in the case of Metromontaine Padana region. The coalition of actors we were involving will have and do already have some results, some benefits from participating to the research. First of all, we were developing during 2024 this local community project, Future Labs, that are involving different communities and are re-elaborating scientific knowledge produced with the project within local communities in order to discuss in specific valleys, specific municipalities, how are we going to deal with the future climate change impact, the arrival of people from metropolitan areas, the rising in the prices of real estate, and so on and so forth. Then there is a new research line on climate change and entrepreneurial innovation that was possible due to the support of Confindustria. That is the National Association of Firms of Italian industrial subjects that was aware of the relevance of our project, contacted us during the project, and now is part of the network. They want to know to what extent climate change will have an impact on the relocation of industries, firms, on the reorganization of work and jobs dimension in a multi-local way. Finally, last but not least, we were capable to develop a new framework agreement on the basis of MICLIMI results involving the University of Turin, ISTAT, the Italian Ministry of the Environment, but also the Alpine Convention, that is the convention included the 7 Alpine countries, in a new research project that has started 1 month ago on the link between demography, migration, and climate change at Alpine level, considering mainly demographic data. All this has been conducting in interaction to some extent with the European Commission, because the project started with the European Climate Pact ambassadors. So we had the opportunity to present this data in Brussels in September, and we are in interaction with the European Commission because, of course, it's in their interest to be in touch and informed about our activities. So this is to close the book, just to give you a taste of in Italian. Now we are publishing three articles, yes, are under revision in English. So hopefully I will be able to share with you these articles in the very next months. This is the book in Italian, and any one of you eventually could already read it. And yeah, from my side, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andrea. So it's time for the Q&A session, and let me also introduce the director of our institute, corresponding member of Russian Academy of Science, Alexey Vladimirovich Kuznetsov, and probably you will start this session.
Good evening, Professor Membretti. Thank you for your interesting report. And I have one comment and one question. Beginning with the comment, I want to say that it is really very interesting approach to investigate local migrations in connection with climate changes. Because it's not only the task for mountain regions. I try to imagine possible fields of such investigations in Russia, and immediately I understand that our temporary houses, so named dachas, around Moscow develop not only in the line of economic changes, in the line of infrastructure changes like good internet connection in villages, but also with climate changes, and not only in connection with the will of Moscow citizens to go in comfortable natural surroundings, but also with changes for basic infrastructure. I mean, for example, water supply, canalization supply, and so on, because it was difficult to imagine a cheap variant of such infrastructure 2 decades ago in Moscow region, and nowadays sometimes we can see that people, especially in summer cottages of the south part of Moscow region, overcome our winters without any losses due to changes in the climate. But at the same time, this situation raises, as I see, a very important methodological question. How can we divide the influence of economic factors? You mentioned the low cost of living in villages, including mountains. Then really climate changes, including maybe considerations of health, surroundings, and so on and so on, but also the third consideration, which is connected with infrastructure development, both transport infrastructure, internet communication, and so on and so on. So how we can calculate the input of these three groups of factors, because probably, like a hypothesis, almost all migration from cities to mountains in northern Italy could be connected with infrastructure possibilities and the will to make costs of living lower than in large cities. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your intervention, your comments. Yes, I think that first of all, you are totally right. Our approach is not something that should be applied only or mainly to mountainous areas. I was referring to a way that now the Italians do have to escape from heat waves in places where the temperature during the summer is lower. But at the same time, the example you were mentioning of people, for example, from Moscow moving to their dacha in the countryhood, it's very interesting because it's another way, for example, during the winter, to live in places where in the recent past it was not possible to stay because of, for example, the cost of heating, as you were mentioning. So I mean, this reflection about internal migration is something we could and we can applicate to different contexts. It means considering that people are moving to more favorable conditions of life if they have, of course, the opportunity. For example, they do need to have a second home, or there should be a policy offering for some months per year the opportunity to stay in some place because it's part of a welfare policy. This depends. So this is the first point, and so I really appreciate your intervention about this. About the issue of isolating, let's say, the impact of climate change. This is quite impossible, in my opinion, because as I was trying to show in my brief presentation, in Italy, like in other countries, we do have several factors impacting: pull factor and push factors. As you were mentioning, for example, in small villages, it's possible that the cost of life is lower than in metropolitan areas. So this is a pull factor, together with the fact that temperature during the summer is really more livable than in metropolitan areas with heat waves. But also you should have to consider the factor of infrastructures, as you were already mentioning. So if you have a motorway or not, if you do have public transports. So, I mean, it's very difficult. Eventually, it's not possible to isolate climate change impact, but I think that it's possible to create this complex index that consider different factors. So what we can analyze and observe is the result of the interaction between different factors. I mean, I think that we are not in the condition, at least now, to isolate the different factors precisely. But we can understand that there is a mix, not of 100 factors, but because this is not useful to analyze 100 factors. But if you have 4, 5 indicators coming together in an index, you have a first insight. And then we can discuss the proportion, the weight of each indicator. Maybe not so precisely, it's not 10, 20, 15, but we have that 30%, 40% is this, 20% is that. And I think that we are close to this aim, to this opportunity. And yes, so finally, I think that the most relevant issue is to, again, work on methodology. Because when we will be able to develop a stronger, even stronger methodology, interaction between different data. Now we are working with ISTAT, for example, in Italy, our national statistical offices, in order to integrate different data. Just to give you an example, we are trying to include data from mobile phones within the tracking of the mobility, human mobility of people. So in order to really understand where people are moving, are living, because on the one hand, you can take your official residence in a town or in a village, but on the other hand, it's possible that you really do not live there most of the time. So integrating different sources and trying to build stronger indicators and stronger indexes in order to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions and comments in the audience? Yeah, yes, please.
Buongiorno, Signor Membretti. Thank you very much for a very interesting report. I'm Kirill Degtyaryov, a researcher from Lomonosov Moscow State University, Geographical Faculty, Laboratory for Renewable Energy Resources. My question is partly the continuation of Mr. Kuznetsov's question. From the other side, people migrating from cities to mountains require more infrastructure, require more energy supply, gas, heating, roads, and so on. And it can be, maybe it can be a problem. From the other side, there is an environmental aspect. There are more people somewhere in this case in mountains. The more additional burden for additional burden for a fragile mountain environment. Is this a problem, or maybe not, or maybe there are too few people to create these problems, or is it is it an object of your investigations now?
Yeah, thank you for your questions. First of all, yes, I think that you are totally right. When you consider people moving from metropolitan areas to rural, mountainous ones, most of all, it's a matter of services, infrastructures, connections. In Italy, and not only in Italy, all around the Alps, we do have these movements of people because there are infrastructures. Without infrastructures, you will not have people moving in remote regions without the possibility to go to a hospital, to reach a cinema or shops or schools for their children. So in this sense, the reversal trend of people from metropolitan areas toward the mountains means that there is a new call for infrastructuring the whole territory. For this, we call the region the Metropolitan Padana region, because there is an even stronger opportunity to interconnect the most industrialized and urbanized areas with the mountain and rural ones. And this will produce, in our opinion, considering climate change impact in particular, forms of circular mobility, multi-local dueling, even more people, because during the COVID, you know, for example, in Italy, not only in Italy, we had a strong movement of people towards rural areas doing smart working. And this was really a good opportunity. Then national conditions were changing. There was no a national legislation about this. It was something like an emergence. But now we do have this opportunity. So when you have a digital infrastructure, digital connection, and road and infrastructure physically connecting people, the metropolitan space could become, and probably will become, a space of circular mobility, work, and life. On the other hand, I take very seriously your warning, because there is an impact of all our activities do have an impact on the environment. Consider that the Padana Plain is probably the area most affected by air pollution in Western Europe. So because of its configuration, its morphology, because it's something totally or quite totally with mountains around, so the pollution remains there. At the same time, when you are going to incentivize circular mobility, you are going to produce impact on the surroundings. So in this case, on the mountains. When we were discussing, and we are still discussing with our interlocutors, for example, the stakeholders at the local, regional levels, we are discussing how to mitigate this impact. And the first issue is to what extent put a limit on the number of people that can move. Because the possibility to host people, let's say, in these rural and mountainous environments is limited. We need to consider that, as in the back, I have this picture of the Alps. In places like this, you cannot have 100 of thousands of people living. So again, there is a matter of considering the balance between natural resources, the respect and the careful approach to the environment, and the opportunity of the people to move. And for this reason, we are more suggesting policies of mitigation, policies, of course, of sustainable approach to local development in these territories. But again, the capacity to host people, you know that the ecological footprint we do have in this territory must have a limit. It's not possible to live to the, let's say, to the market or to the autonomous regulation these processes. We need policies in order to govern them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, please, Shahnoza.
Hello, Professor Membretti. My name is Shahnoza. I am student of this institute. First of all, thank you for your presentation. It was really interesting for me because migration is also one of my interested, theme. My first question is about the migration which you observed in 2020. Was it temporary or permanent? I mean, what kind of people this migration, for what kind of people this migration was interested? For people who are already retired or for youth also? We know that 2019 and 2020 was full of issue, one of most of them, COVID-19. And what about now? Is it still interesting for the people of, as I mentioned before, who are retired and want to live their life in a very beautiful area with a good, air, or for youth also? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Yes, we were witnessing a peak in the change of residence in 2020, 2021. And this was definitely due to the pandemics. People were escaping from metropolitan areas, but it was not only a matter of elderly people, not at all. In particular, elderly people were not leaving metropolitan areas in that period because they were mostly scared of living far from hospitals, from health centers. So they wanted to remain close to these centers that are mainly in metropolitan areas. In that period, 2020, 2021, we were witnessing a movement of people between, let's say, their 30, 35 till 50 years old. So in the full period of activity, working people, most of them were involved in some kind of smart working, or even some of them were not working at all, because in that period, you know, there were firms closing, there were even public office not operating, and so they simply were profiting from second homes and staying there. Then there was a reversal trend, in Italy in particular, because in 2021, at the end of 2021, the national legislation was not even more so in favor of remote working, in particular for civil servants and people working for the welfare state, for public offices, and so on. They wanted that people come back physically to work. And so there was a reversal trend. It was interesting because many people were also complying. There were some kind of demonstration, let's say, some kind of hostility to this approach of the national government. Let me say in brackets that there was also a matter of competition among territories, because you know that when you have the physical presence of people in a town, you are consuming, people are going to bars, are buying clothes, are going to cinemas. And when you stay in a small village in the mountains, for example, your level of consumption is decreasing. And in particular, you are not using those services that are located in metropolitan areas. So there was also competition, and there was a strong pressures of economic stakeholders of metropolitan areas to bring back people to the towns. Do not leave them in the mountains or in rural areas, they were saying, because we do need these consumers, these people living in the town. In any case, the central legislation was different, so many people were obliged to come back to physically work in presence. But I must say that the trend was continuing, because nowadays we do have an increasing number, in particular in the private sector, of people, remote workers, living in the mountains or in rural villages, and they do even not have a physical office, a physical space in a firm. They work only from remote. In the mountains, we do have a strong percentage of people in these conditions. On the other side, of course, now we do have an increasing number of retired people. This is the phenomenon you were quoting of the amenity migration, I was already saying before. Also because the expectation of life is increasing. You do have a lot of active elderly people, and they feel that in the nature, in the mountains, in this landscape, they can live better their long aging, because it's a matter of decades, not years. So this is part of the issue, of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have several questions. From the beginning of your lecture and till the end. So the first question: building the coalition of support. Thank you very much for sharing this experience. It is extremely important for Russia because we are not so advanced in actually organizing the financial support for our research projects. And here comes the first question in this series. Was there any competition on the side of think tanks or universities with you and your group when you were trying to promote and to structurize this project? So in other words, why you, not the university or another think tank?
Okay, thank you, Maxime. If I understand well, the question is why our group in the end was capable to gain this support.
Yes.
Several factors. First of all, there is a matter of a pre-existing legitimation, because in my case and with other colleagues, we already have been leading research on the issue of human mobility, migration, rural and mountainous development. So there was quite a strong attention in several, let's say, institutional environments towards our group. On the other hand, again, I must underline always the role of personal linkages. But I would like to stress this, because sometimes it seems that this is the bad side of the issue. Okay, you were capable of taking money because there was your friend and your project was not so good, but you had the good friends. Okay, sometimes it happens. I presume that is not our case, because there was also a creation of linkages before this project, in particular at transversal levels. I was mentioning transdisciplinary approach. For example, I was involved with other colleagues in transdisciplinary networks at national and international levels. And this was making us stronger with respect to others, because it was very well known that we are close each other with different disciplines, and this is a plus. Then another issue is our capacity to link the topic of the research to very local issues. Because I remind you that the bank foundation is a national bank foundation, but the headquarters are in Milan, and they primarily want to have some impact on Lombardy, Piedmont, Northern Italy. So it's part of their commitment, and so we were capable to invest in this direction and producing data useful for local actors. So these were three of the main factors impacting on the result of the proposal. And consider that, last but not least, this kind of financing is not a financing that you gain with responding to a public call. There was not a public call. We were bargaining directly with the bank foundation. And so there were no limits. Okay, they told us you cannot ask 100 million euros, but tell us your aims, and then we discuss. And in fact, we had to modify something in discussing with the foundation. But this was also very good, because often I was conducting, for example, I was leading an Horizon 2020. When you apply for this big call, you have to push your issue within this very, very strict template, and you do not have the possibility to really interact and bargain with your interlocutors. And here we had these opportunities, and this was very good.
Yeah, thank you very much. I see that Dr. Shenajak is here again. So please, your question.
Yes, добрый день and buongiorno, dear professor and dear colleagues. So thank you very much for your very interesting presentation, as we are actually just in the middle of COP29 summits in Azerbaijan, and this presentation and this seminar is very meaningful according to this event, of course. My question is, if you are observing, yes, you answered the question, if you are observing the same trend that you are talking about the city exodus instead of rural exodus, which was the trend before. And I would like to know if we can consider your works as a master plan for the cities, climate change master plan, and if the local authority is using your studies for developing policy according to your recommendations, first. Secondly, my question is, if the local authorities in the mountain areas, if they are considering this new trend, the migration in the mountain, as a security problems for the people who are living there since centuries and decades. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. Yes, we are really in the middle of another COP, hopefully, let's say with some results. Yes, about the impact we can have on climate change master plan and local authorities at metropolitan level. We are working in this direction. First of all, because the metropolitan city of Turin, that is the most relevant metropolitan region in Italy, is still within our activities. So we are within even a legal framework, a framework of cooperation with the metropolitan city of Turin, and this is helping us a lot in offering them data and tools for defining their policies. At the same time, consider that, as I was showing in a slide, we have been signing 1 month ago a new agreement at a national level with the National Institute of Statistics, the Italian Institute, the Ministry of the Environment, and the University of Turin and other actors, and the Alpine Convention. And this is precisely with the goal, with the aim of creating and designing new policies in terms of this exodus, or maybe I will not use the term exodus, but in any case, this circular mobility, this reorganization of the mobility flows. So definitely our aim is not only to produce recommendations, because consider that, again, I was involved in several international projects, for example, the EU ones, and always you have these final recommendations. But most of the time, these recommendations are not considered in any case. You even do not know to whom are addressed these final recommendations. We do not want to produce final recommendations. We do want to have the actors on board, the stakeholders on board with us. So this mix of academia, scientific sector, and public and even private sector to design together these actions, not recommendations. Coming to the last issue, local communities, this is a very, very relevant point. Thank you for raising it, because most of the time we consider that we consider mainly the needs of the majority of the people that, even in a country like Italy, do live in metropolitan areas. And so we think, okay, we need to manage the mobility of these people, migration, climate change, and so on. But there is a proportion of people that in Italy is more or less 25% of the population, so are millions of people living in rural and mountainous villages. And what do they think about these vertical migrations, as I call them? We see that there are different attitudes. In particular, elderly people or people less educated in mountain villages are very scared about what they call a vertical invasion. So they are scared about their traditions, to losing their control on their resources. And I think they are right to some extent, because it's a matter also of negotiation between different stakeholders. And so for this reason, we have been establishing these local future labs, because we want to engage local communities in designing together the welcoming of new inhabitants. And also this is a part of the research results. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I also had a question regarding the future labs. Is it a widespread practice in Italy to have such labs in rural areas or even in the metropolitan areas, or it was your invention in this project?
Consider that it's quite common now in metropolitan areas. Mm-hmm. We are witnessing since 20 years, 15 years, there is a spread of these practices of forecasting. So defining scenarios about what is going to happen in this metropolitan neighborhood, or about this local development strategy, youngsters, and so on. In rural areas, we are among the first ones in Italy. So it's not so common. It's not easy, I mean, because again, we wanted to involve all the communities, but I must admit that we are involving more educated people, younger people. So again, it's difficult to engage elderly people, people with low educational profile. They usually do not take part to these laboratories, to these workshops. But of course, it's a first step to engage at least a part of the community in order to show that you are considering their approach, their values, their willings, and not just discussing how to move people from one place to another place. But it's something that we are developing in these very years, in these very months. So I will come back with some results more, I think, next year, probably. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I do have a lot of other questions, but I understand that I cannot spend our common time for that, and I will direct them to Professor Membretti directly. Just as a conclusion for our seminar, first of all, of course, I would like to really thank you for this presentation. You shared different aspects of this project, including the scientific management within this project is also very important, and I think this is a separate part for further discussions. We are not so skillful in this field. Of course, when I was listening to the results of your presentation, I was thinking that probably Russia is a safer place for Italians in this situation, because we exchanged our opinions with Professor Kuznetsov, and of course, geographically speaking, Russia has more advantages with the climate change, and probably that's why the focus for research in our country should be different. But what we do understand that your transdisciplinary approach is very productive. So, for example, I know that Russian big tech giant Yandex has already organized a separate subdivision, Yandex Weather, and they are thinking about the strategy in the climate services. So they collect data, climate-related data, weather, meteorological, etc., but they don't have the business models in this field yet. And here, your project that shows at least some possible directions for these services, and for us, we can find a strong partner in the face of Yandex. So I think, yes, probably we should think more in a practical way, using your rich experience and probably your participation in some of the projects. And I hope this is only the beginning of our mutual discussions. Thank you once again for your time, for the presentation. Hope to see you next time.
Thank you, Maxim. Just as a greeting, I take with great pleasure this invitation to continuing our collaboration. As you know, our scientific exchange. Also, I would like to say to the students, to the PhD candidates, that I am totally available for any exchange information. Mostly of my research, of our research, is in English. You can find results and publication on ResearchGate or academia. But I can also provide you original data, or in case anyone is interested in discussing more the methodological issues that I totally agree with you, Maxim, is possible to approach in your country and in your specific situation with this background. So thank you again for your invitation and for the opportunity to share with you my thoughts and my results. Thank you.
Thank you. And the seminar is closed. Bye-bye.